you've got enough to worry about. There's a whole other real estate bubble in Australia that could wreak major damage on our economy. We all know about the immense debt taken on for housing. Commercial property could be an even bigger risk if we find ourselves in line at Centrelink in a few years' time. The reason could well be a crash in commercial real estate. The prices of offices, shopping centers, warehouses and new developments have shot up recently. That is making experts nervous, because commercial real estate is even more prone to booms and busts than housing. These next 3 graphs show the prices of 3 kinds of commercial property over the past 3 decades. The blue lines for offices and industrial property go nearly vertical in the past few years, showing giant increases in price. But rents aren't keeping up. This market has the nation's economists worried. The Reserve Bank of Australia sent its head of financial stability out this week to sound the alarm on commercial property, and to remind us of our history. Australia went through a commercial real estate bust in the 1990s, cautioned the RBA's head of financial stability Jonathan Kearns, and it nearly sent our banks broke. This was a classic boom-bust or hog cycle story. The second half of the 1980s saw buoyant economic conditions, strong growth in commercial property prices and a large increase in commercial property construction. Quote, Mr. Kearns said, a ready supply of credit fueled the boom. Following bank deregulation and the entry of foreign banks into the domestic market in the mid-1980s, the domestic banks competed to hold on to their market share. Lending standards were lowered. Quote, it nearly ended in disaster with office prices falling by half and banks teetering on the edge of a cliff. He added, losses mounted at banks with 2 having to be rescued, and 1 major bank needing to raise capital. Quote, Mr. Kearns said, when banks need to be rescued, you're on the brink of a total economic disaster. Bank failure can create financial contagion that brings the economy to a standstill and tips thousands of people out of work. When an Australian takes a loan for a house, they must pay it back or enter personal bankruptcy. That means loans get repaid. In America, in the housing crash, this was not the case. People could send their keys back and get out of their loan. Banks ended up owning a whole lot of really crappy homes worth nothing. Commercial real estate, including warehouse, shopping malls and offices, does not have the same structure as mortgages. Mr. Kearns said, the lenders have much less incentive to pay back the loan. Losses can also be greater on lending for commercial property than for residential property, because borrowers with a limited liability company structure have less incentive to repay than individual residential mortgage borrowers who face full recourse. He said, loans that don't get repaid is where lenders get in strife, and it doesn't have to happen right now. It could be in 5 years when interest rates go up. Another big difference between mortgages and commercial property lending is refinancing. Commercial property is rarely on a 30-year mortgage. Instead, it will be on a shorter-term loan that has to be refinanced every few years. If interest rates are a lot higher at that time, the commercial property owner may not be able to get a new loan. That sort of funding squeeze